And we could ask, how successful is this decomposition-based approach, and is it sufficient for us to understand how to steward or drive positive change in social systems? So this is a talk by Michael Sanders, who is an executive director of one of these What Work centers, which is what they have in the UK, where they um, try to do these randomized controls trials on many different things and try to figure out what actually works and what doesn't. And these are usually like things that are of interest in for public policy. And what he so this was part of the behavioral science and policy, behavior change science and policy symposia theories that we did with policymakers and researchers in Finland. And what he talked about here in this talk is about all of those things that they've been doing, and really not how they haven't worked out as well as they might have hoped. So they say that almost all interventions tested by this uh, center, almost everything hasn't worked. So this is a feature; it's not an exception. And they consider that they really want to view themselves as also myth busting. So when there is this widely spread idea that, hey, this thing will solve everything, they want to go and see whether it actually does, and sort of be an arbiter of knowledge in that sense. So one important thing here to see is that the median effect size is very low. The mean effect size is also very low. And but also what you have here is this a long tail. I don't know if this is heavy or fat, but it definitely is long and very skewed. So there are some of these interventions that are highly effective. And I've been telling some people that they should do an analysis of the tails based on extreme value theory on this, but I haven't managed to recruit anyone yet. But anyway, so, and it might be that even if you have a small effect size, if you could scale it up, it would be super important. If it would be a very cheap intervention that gives a very small boost, then like scaling that up, you might get a big result for a small expense. So, for example, one example was when we were doing in the Finnish Prime Minister's office in this behavioral science advisory group, or FinBepol group that it's now called. We did this. We sent a text message to young voters and found that, okay, so the text message was effective not only in increasing their voting activity, but also the voting activity of other people in their households. That was quite interesting, but we of course now need to figure out what happens when it's repeated and how people react to that and so forth when it loses its novelty value, so to say. So if scaling, if things, if cheap things could be easy to scale, then we would be in a very nice position. But that seems to be quite difficult. So these large-scale trials have not really been very successful. And he also talked about revisiting issues around complexity and how it needs a more prominent role. So another thing he raises up is the side effects. So you wouldn't run a medical trial and not look at the potential side effects, but the policy trials are consistently done uh, with this routine. So we will talk about side effects later, but it's a very important thing to keep in mind. And in public policy research during the last few years, there have been a lot of discussion about how these so-called nudge interventions, they can be quite brittle, or as I call it, fragile to changes in context. And there's been a lot of discussion about moving towards a more comprehensive ideas, holistic use of systems and so forth to um, move away from this simplistic idea of a nudge, which is an inconspicuous change in the environment or a decision-making architecture. So instead of, for example, you needing to check a box to opt in, you check a box to opt out, and it changes people's behavior quite predictably. But for the most important things, it might not be that useful, and these articles discuss this um, problem in the behavioral public policy sphere. And when I talk about behavioral public policy, I mean basically all policy decisions that somehow affect human behavior. And there's also this behavioral insight team is a very famous um, group that has been promoting this approach to nudges for the last few decades already, I think. And they recently published this manifesto for applying behavioral science. And there are a lot of good criticisms towards using behavioral science in one of the first pages of this publication. So I really suggest Googling this and having a look. And they also provide solutions and also consider systems in those solutions. I think it's a bit wanting, but I think it's a nice, perhaps a step to the right direction. Although the main perspective of an intervener outside the system who knows best, it's sort of still, I feel that the spirit of that thinking is still in there. If you want to read on read about the slow, very slow progress, historical progress of complex systems ideas in the field of healthcare, and also a bit on the policy side. Here are some papers related to this. But something that's not oftentimes taken into account in this field is the real essence of complex systems science, so that it's not necessarily the stuff that matters, the stuff that a thing is composed of, but how those components interact to create these patterns of organization.